Good evening, everybody. I think we're ready to get started, so I'm just going to start anyway. My name is Martin Boyd. I'm the VP of Product Marketing here at Profisee, and welcome to our inaugural Data After Dark event. This is the first of what we hope will be a series of these events. We're hoping that doing something outside of normal office hours, at least for some of you, outside of normal office hours with a little bit of a more casual atmosphere should be informative, but also maybe entertaining and certainly a little bit of a break from the normal, speaking to PowerPoint type of things. So in a moment, I'll have our guests introduce themselves. But first, I want to just mention we're going to be talking about master data management and how it operates and the benefits that it should have in a typical Azure environment. And hopefully you're able to enjoy that with us using your cocktail kit. If you're one of the early people to sign up, you got something like this. Mine literally arrived about 4 minutes before we started the call here, so I haven't been able to pour mine, but hopefully you have been able to pour some of yours. Couple of other admin things. There's various different engagement things like Q&A boxes and stuff at the bottom of your screen. You can arrange them, move them around, make them larger, smaller, and use them in any way you want. Because we're trying to have a more of a casual kind of conversation here, we're happy to have you drop questions in the Q&A, and we will try and incorporate them into the conversation as appropriate. The on-demand version of this webcast, it is being recorded, and so if you want to return to it or forward it to a colleague or whatsoever, the link for that should be available in about a day or so, and you'll be informed by that on that by email. So let's get started then. Let's get started with toast for anybody who has their cocktail in hand. This is not the old-fashioned. This is something else that I found in the cupboard. But cheers to everybody. And let's get started. So the three people we have, rather four including myself, but the three people who are going to be primarily speaking today are Neil Danner, Chief Technology Officer at Quest Analytics, James Serra, who is a big data and data warehouse evangelist at Microsoft, and Eric Melcher, the Chief Technology Officer of Profisee. So I'm going to just go around the table and have those guys introduce themselves in that order so you know who you're listening to. Every one of the people on the call here has quite a good amount of experience in master data management, so we're just going to be talking about it, and hopefully that will be helpful. So Neil, do you want to tell us just a little bit about yourself and your perspective on MDM as a customer and user of the technology?
Sure. So again, my name is Neil Danner. I'm Chief Technology Officer here at Quest Analytics in the Kansas City area. And I've been in the industry, gosh, it's been almost 30 years, hard to admit. So our products here focus on provider network data and provider network analytics, right? So accessibility to care, regulatory, and compliance. We have many, many awesome customers in our portfolio. And our case for MDM is we want to make sure that we can represent unique individuals that we are interacting with in our business processes, and to make sure that we streamline interaction with those individuals. And so for MDM for us, it's bringing in multiple sources of data that give us information about constituents in the healthcare marketplace, and to formulate a golden view, a golden identity for each one of those to streamline the way that we interact and represent them in our systems. So a very important aspect, Martin.
Excellent. Thanks, Neil. James, do you want to tell us a little bit about your life and work in Microsoft?
Sure. I've been at Microsoft 7 years now in various positions. The latest one I've been in a couple of years is a data and AI architect at the New York City Microsoft Technology Center. And I spend most of my days with customers, obviously virtually now, but having half-day or full-day discussions on architect design sessions for the most part, where one big topic is enterprise data warehousing, and a big part of that is governance. And if a company comes in and they're not sure about what data governance is, how should they go about it? I will talk to them, and that could be a long conversation. And master data management comes up along with that, and data cleaning. And I make sure if they're going to build out a solution and they're incorporating all this data, that they need to make sure the data is correct. And part of that is the data governance and master data management. So that becomes a frequent topic with customers who are in those design sessions talking about an enterprise data warehouse.
And you have a pretty long history with master data management and governance, I believe.
Yeah, it's probably a dozen years or so. I first got involved with Profisee on an engagement in Houston many years ago, and had always been involved in some aspect of that, and at times working as a developer and building master data management solutions to just talking about it with customers. So it's something that has been on my plate for at least a dozen years now.
Excellent. It's an evergreen topic, I think, in IT. Eric, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and your roles?
Yeah, absolutely. So I've been in data my entire career. I've been at Profisee now for, I think I'm within a month of my my 10-year anniversary. Prior to that, was in the BI data warehousing world as well. So spent quite a few years implementing data warehouses as a consultant. At Profisee, I've held a few roles in consulting. So I spent 4 or 5 years out in the field working with some of our earlier customers, implementing our platform. I've spent some time doing product marketing as well as product management. So currently as a CTO, my focus is on our product strategy and roadmap, and obviously the engineering and QA functions as well as support. So been at the company a long time, and feel like I'm becoming an expert at this, I think.
You're almost there, Eric. We'll grade you afterwards.
10,000 hours, right?
And just to introduce myself a little bit better, although the bulk of the content here, I think, is going to come from the other gentleman. I've been through a number of different companies, technology companies, from startups to Oracle, where I've dealt with data quality and master data management in various different forms. So mostly on the product marketing side of things. So let's get the ball rolling and kind of double click with each one of the people here. In the same order, but really ask, what is your perspective on master data management, guys? When do you, if you're explaining it to someone, at a cocktail party, for example, what would you say about master data management and how someone would engage with it, and what would they get out of it? When would they want to use it? So Neil, let's start with you. And given that you're actually a practitioner yourself and you have an implementation use case, you can maybe talk a little bit about that at the same time.
Sure. Well, probably the simplest one is the view that, as with most companies, you have different departments and different divisions, right, that work with constituents, right, their customers, and have data and information that represent aspects either about the customer or, the constituents in the customer's marketplace, right? So if you have multiple systems in your company that each have representations of, for example, customer, right? You could have Department A may have their own systems where they record their customers for their products. You could have Department B that has a similar but different view of customer, right? And when you look across the business, the fact that you don't have alignment and unique identity, right, across your customer base as a whole, all the customers that your business and all product lines serve, that can lead to some anomalies in your data, right? The way you interact with those constituents can become impacted, right? Customers might hear multiple voices coming from the same company in regards to working with them and collaborating with them and including them in your processes. So MDM is really key to bringing that together and creating a unified view of the entities in your business space, right? So we are in provider network data, analytics and management. And so, we have entities like providers. Providers are associated to healthcare organizations. Providers have specialties. They have certain locations where they service and provide healthcare. There's a plethora, right, of different contexts in that information model. And if you have different product lines that need that data to drive analytics or to incubate and curate relationships with individuals that data represents, you really need MDM, right? You bring MDM in, you bring your sources through it, you apply data quality controls and data governance, and define the rules that the system needs to use to bring those otherwise disparate, separate sets of data together and to uniquely identify them. And when you do that, that really brings congruence across the product lines and the capabilities your business is delivering into the marketplace.
So have you, I think you've probably been through multiple iterations of implementing similar type systems, Neil. Are you, I said earlier, it's a kind of an evergreen topic. How have you seen that evolve in your professional experience?
Yeah, so this goes back a long way, right? I won't age myself too much here, but you know, over 20 years ago, in the late 90s, actually, I worked with a group of people to assemble the precursor to what would be an MDM system. And it was, you know, to perform some provider healthcare accessibility analysis. And after going through that iteration, the realization is it's actually really hard to do it well, right? And it seems superficial on the surface when you first enter into the concepts of trying to master your data and having governance. But once you really get a purview of the problem space and actually the talent, right, that you would need to design and build a solution like this, and most importantly, a way to provide the operational model to run and operate that type of system, it's actually much bigger than you would think, right? So my experience was, you know, I've built a couple from the ground up when they really didn't exist in the marketplace, at least to a cost point at the time. And then I worked at a Fortune 5 healthcare technology company in my past as well, and MDM was a huge topic there as well. And there are different orders of magnitude on MDM solutions, and it really depends on what your business needs, right? You can have you know, very focused solutions in the MDM space, or you can go very, very broad with a large capability set. In the case where you're a large company, you have different divisions, different business units, et cetera. So the realization that I've had is, again, it sounds easy, it's actually pretty hard, and it's important to identify your requirements, what you're trying to solve in your business space, right? It starts with information first, and then assessing how that information interacts with your business processes, and, right, and providing value through your services and products, and having that centralized view and bringing that information together and applying an MDM tool that's going to meet your needs. You know, there's a lot of discipline and knowledge that comes into that. And in my perspective, knowing that people and resources are really the biggest constraint to business. If you have a development organization in-house and they're building your products and services that you're selling and monetizing, MDM can be viewed as a commodity service. And I think the value that I have learned in my career is those aren't things you really want to offer. They're hard to do well, and to have a comprehensive capability set, it's better to go through a due diligence cycle, do a technology selection, figure out what your needs are, meet with vendors, and make sure you have a good fit on solving, and let those technologies solve your MDM problem, and keep your own people and your own resource investments and your models, let those be allocated and used to actually build your products and services that actually drive up your revenue.
Perfect. So we'll return to some of those topics about, sorry, was there someone saying something? No, my bad. So we'll return to that in just a minute in the further rounds of discussion. But James, I don't know if you've ever implemented MDM, but as you said, you kind of advise people on it on a weekly basis. How do you introduce the topic of governance and master data management to the people you're speaking to, and how do you explain to them what it is and why they should care?
Yeah, many times when customers come to me and they're looking to build an enterprise data warehouse using the cloud, and the bottom line is they're trying to pull this data together and get better business insights out of it and make better business decisions. And to do that, there's a lot of moving parts of creating an enterprise data warehouse. And one of them is pulling the data, extracting it all from these different sources. And no matter what source they pull it from, they're going to have to clean the data. And I have had arguments with customers who think their source data is going to be completely clean. And I always say, I'll bet you any amount of money you want, once we pull it in there, we're going to see some problems. It could be that, well, the order entry system forces them to enter a birth date. So if they don't know it, they'll enter some birth date in the future or 200 years ago, or they put some dummy data in there, blank data. And so as you're building this data warehouse, all of a sudden these issues come to light. And it's important for customers, when I'm talking about building a solution, is to allocate enough time for data governance, that they're going to have to clean the data. And if they're pulling data from multiple sources that may have duplicate customers, as an example, they're going to have to master the data, because the last thing you want to do is come up with a report and you give it to the end user for the first time and they look at it and go, why is this customer listed twice? Because you lose the confidence right away. So you had a really bad first impression that's tough to make up for them. So you got to spend the time up front making sure that data is clean. And part of that is creating these golden records of customer data as that example, and they're understanding that there could be misspellings, and it's not easy and trivial just to say, well, I'll just create a SQL statement that's going to group them all together, because the names are going to be misspelled, or they're going to use middle names when others are not. So you can't, it's really, really difficult to try to build something your own. So that's where I start to mentioning there's a lot of third-party companies who've done this, especially if you have a lot of different data sources and large amount of records in there. You don't want to take this on your own. So let's talk about master data management. Let's talk about products out there. And again, put enough time in building your solution that you're going to clean the data and master it, so you can have something that's successful when it's rolled out. So it's just educating. A lot of customers don't know what they don't know. They've never built a solution, enterprise data warehouse before, and so they're not really quite understanding what MDM is, and that's where I educate them.
Excellent. One of the things I find interesting is your first comment there, that the data may look just fine in your source system, whether it's your CRM system or your ERP or whatever, but when you bring it out and meld it with other data sources, that's when you start to see the inconsistencies and the duplications and just the problems in your data that you need to solve. And I think a lot of people are very, very much blind to that before they actually try.
Yeah, there's a lot of that for sure. They don't realize, and they don't set enough time to clean the data. And when I look at project lines, I always go, well, let's look at the data governance part of cleaning the data. It's going to be double or triple what you're thinking it's going to be. So make sure you set about that time, or you're going to be unsuccessful in rolling this out.
Yeah, I think you cannot underemphasize the importance of data quality, right? Something that we've always learned in the industry is garbage in is garbage out, right? So you have to minimize that garbage impact on your data before you ever try and master it, right?
100%. Yeah, that's we see that all the time. Eric, what's your take on all of this, and when you're explaining MDM as a requirement, and also what do you, in your role as CTO, what do customers ask you for in terms of capability to get the data right?
Yeah, I mean, MDM is this very broad-ranging thing, right? So the types of problems it solves, the variety of data you can manage is pretty broad, to say the least. And so, it always has to be grounded, I feel like, in what people do, what somebody does, what type of company they work with, and what their particular role is to help make it relevant to them. To kind of circle back to the original question, one of my least favorite questions at a cocktail party is, what do you do? It's kind of a running joke we have internally, because I usually kind of answer, I work in software, and then I try to brush it off, like, oh, what kind of software? And I kind of slow play it. Oh, it's just data, boring stuff. But like, some people, they're persistent.
There's nothing boring about data, Eric.
Yeah. We'll get to master data management, and then they'll, it's a little bit of an esoteric topic to a degree, right? Everybody suffers from the lack of master data management, but very few people really understand what it is and how it can help them. So, what I always try to do is, well, what do you do? And what's your role at your company? And usually in that point, I can ask them a couple of questions and get down to an actual business problem that they have in their real life that we can help with. And that's how you can help it click. Because I find that if you just describe it in the abstract, people don't quite grasp what the opportunity or the benefit is. So, everybody knows that better data is better, and they know that bad data is bad. I think everyone knows that intuitively, but the challenge is always like, well, why does it matter, and how does it matter? And so whether it's just explaining to somebody or talking to a prospective customer or a current customer, and we're having these types of conversations, you should always start with a problem. Where I see people struggle was when they say, we're going to create the best customer master that we can. And they wind up investing a lot of time trying to get data under management that maybe is not as important, versus focusing on the slice of customer data that they can use to solve a real business problem, whatever that may be. So it could be improving their ability to cross-sell across multiple channels, or improving the ability to understand the total lifetime value of a particular customer, so they can market to them more appropriately. So it's in our space, because MDM is so horizontal. The answer has to kind of be applied to something more specific. Ideally, a problem within a particular vertical and even role within a company.
Yeah, 100%. So let's talk a little bit about Azure. We said at the beginning we were going to talk a little bit about MDM and how it operates in Azure. Eric, do you want to talk just a little bit about your perspective on, does it make any difference whether MDM is deployed to the cloud or on premises, whether it's deployed in Azure or in AWS or whatever environment you're in, and what would be some of the key things you would look for in terms of operating well in those kinds of environments?
Yes, I mean, what we see is that organizations typically want to deploy their MDM platform where their data is, and a lot of companies are moving and pivoting towards the cloud, but that transition takes time, right? A company in 6 months' time doesn't move everything that they may have on-prem into the cloud. So depending on how aggressive they're being, we still find that there's a number of companies that still have a lot of their data on-prem. Where people deploy their MDM solution, and credit to Gartner for this kind of concept of data gravity, which I fully agree with, you should deploy your MDM solution where most of your data lives. So if you're a company that still has most of your data on-prem, you may be best off deploying your MDM solution on-prem, because you're going to have to integrate it with multiple different applications. And so it's best to put it as close as possible to where the data lives. But what we're seeing is obviously many organizations are moving their data into the cloud. It feels like COVID has actually accelerated that a bit. We see it through the lens of more prospects asking about running their master data management solution in the cloud, and typically it's the cloud that they prefer and where most of their stuff is. So that's really the answer, right? Is put your master data management solution where the majority of your data is. I do think it's important, if you're an organization that's still more on-premise oriented, that you think about your future strategy, make sure that whatever solution you pick can run in the cloud. Now, and most products obviously can run in the cloud, at least as an IaaS solution, but I think that's something important to consider, because it does seem like the market in general is headed away from on-premise data centers towards the cloud, with some exceptions, right? There's certain finance companies or insurance, et cetera. There's some industries that are a little more cautious about moving to the cloud, but that seems to be where everything's headed. And quite frankly, that's where a lot of software vendors are investing their innovation. So I think at some point, if you want to use the latest technologies and tooling, they're only going to be available in the cloud. So I think that's just where things are ultimately going to land.
So there's one vendor perspective on the cloud. How about James? You are actually an evangelist for the cloud and for Azure. What's your take on where something like MDM ought to be implemented, and does it make any difference from your perspective whether it's native in the cloud or someplace else?
Well, if we look at the Microsoft products that cover MDM, they don't really have much. There's a product called Master Data Services that is sort of not recommended anymore, I would say, and there's another one called DQS for data cleaning that's also not recommended anymore. So we lean on a lot of partners when we talk about master data management, with customers and Profisee being the one that I recommend just really all the time on there. And when I look,
cheers, James.
Yeah,
I appreciate that.
And I won't go into the history about how Profisee came around, but they have a great relationship with Microsoft and work very closely, understanding what Microsoft is doing so they can integrate better with them, like they're doing now with Profisee and Azure Synapse Analytics and Azure Data Factory. And so I look for some of that synergy, and Profisee has that. And then you look for a solution that is a PaaS solution or very close to being a PaaS solution, what Profisee has now. So when I recommend something to customers, I'm doing it that is going to shortcut the process of them building out solutions and making it much easier for them if they are in the Microsoft world, because that's what I deal with. And so it's like that with a lot of Microsoft situations where Microsoft does not have a product for every different situation. So we look at filling those gaps through Microsoft partners, Profisee being one of them. And Profisee has always been really good with customers. I recommend giving them demos and making them see the value in the product. And then I feel good too, because I'm recommending Microsoft products with other third-party products. And I want to make sure they're successful, or else the customer come back to me and say, well, why did you recommend this? So that's why I've always dealt with Profisee for a very long time, because of the success I've had with customers at Microsoft implementing it, as well as before I came to Microsoft, having built a few solutions with Profisee.
Well, that's great to hear. Before we turn to Neil for the cold hard truth of how hard it really is to implement, what is your experience, James, on some of the common problems that people have when they're trying to deploy MDM into Azure, or any of the logistical or practical issues that people tend to encounter?
I find the biggest problem is not the technology, but the people in the process. And that's with master data management, it's with cleaning it. Customers, and they'll come to me for help with designing, building a center of excellence and defining the roles and responsibility for everybody. Because it can get pretty muddy when you're dealing with within your organization, many different groups who feel like they own the data. And so when you go and say, well, who should be cleaning the data? Who do we ask questions to? You can have these big arguments within a company on that. So that is a political nightmare sometimes that I'm sure Profisee's dealt with many times in there. So my conversation with customers is, the technology is the easy part. Is let's talk about who's going to do the solving and cleaning and who's responsible. Because when you pull data into a enterprise data warehouse and you clean the data well and you master it, does that mean you should go back to the source system and clean it there too? And so you have many arguments and many difficulties with that. And then what's the single source of the truth then? Who's gonna define all that? Who's the final say in that? So I don't deal with that much anymore. I just tell customers they got to deal with it, and I'm sure Profisee has a lot of use cases on that. But to me, it's at least getting them to understand, giving them a heads up that this is going to be more than just a technology discussion. It's going to be that people and process discussion.
Yeah, for sure. There's a lot of we talk about maturity when we're talking to our customers. You know, how mature are they? How much do they know? How much do they grasp of what they need to do beyond just the simple, well, I say the simple technology, but beyond the technology into change management and, as you mentioned earlier, James, the intersection with governance is a pretty important one too, I think.
Yeah.
All right, so Neil, so you've heard two software vendors talk about it from your 20 years of experience implementing these kinds of systems. What are the practical problems you tend to run across, what are some of the considerations you would point out to others that they should think about?
Well, I will reemphasize what James said, right? When you have companies with very large divisions and their data is contributing to a data warehouse, it's more work to get the people on board, right? And what you're trying to get them on board with is what I would call the operational model, right? It's not just the software you're purchasing and integrating into your system, but there's a mindset that you have to help all those parties. You have to bring them in, right, to the story, and you have to explain to them how this is going to inevitably make the business better, how it's going to bring alignment. And that ownership piece that James touched on, that's a barrier, right? To do that. So it's kind of the politics in the conversation. So I think any MDM discussion and success really has to take into account the challenges you're going to have there. Quest Analytics, the company where I work, we're a fairly small company. We don't have divisions with different data sets and silos where we're trying to bring that data together into a warehouse. But probably I would say the biggest challenge for us was being a new company and realizing we needed a formal data governance function, right? And again, this is not just the software. as with the technical capabilities, but it's the business operating model around that. So you're going to need stewards, right, that serve as stewards to supplement the system when it cannot make decisions based on the rules and configuration. You have to have people step in. And so they do have, even though most of it can be highly automated, there's still exceptional cases where you have to have people, right, staff that keep the gears and the cogs running. And so that can be a challenge to assemble that larger operating view and convey the value in that. But once you have that fairly solidified and you get the stakeholders on board, and if you're a larger company, you have different departments and you bring them into the discussions and make them a first-class citizen, then you can move past that point, right? And then it's the realization of the value, and then it's moving on to actual implementation. And on the implementation side, depending on the complexity of an organization, if you're small like us, we will have in the hundreds of data sources that will eventually, right, come into our MDM platform. And we have data governance and that team we are maturing stewardship to help with. But, if you're a larger company, bringing that data in, actually, technically bringing the data in and staging it at a point and feeding the MDM system, that can be some of the challenge. And it's easily overcome if you have the right staff or at least the right partners helping you connect the plumbing, right, and make sure the process works and can be automated. But those are probably the biggest challenges to me. The other is for some MDM installations, not all of your data is in the MDM, right? Your MDM is your mastering, your data governance piece, but there's always supplemental data that it doesn't go into your MDM processes, but on the back end of MDM, right, when things are mastered, you want to bring that supplemental data back in and basically reassociate it to your master data so you can drive your business insights and therefore downstream business decisions off of that. So again, I think it's the political, the process operational model that's probably harder than the technical side.
Yeah, no, I think it is. People tend to be more stubborn than technology in general. There's a question in the chat. Maybe you can just elaborate just a little bit more, Neil, on, do you have any hints or tricks or thoughts on how to get the C-suite engaged and get them to understand the value of an MDM program?
Sure. And probably the best thing that you can do is to have a inventory your current operational model. What are the solutions you have today, right? Think of it from an enterprise perspective, right? For example, the concept of customer might exist in multiple areas, in multiple departments of the company. What you have to do is have a current state view. What are those systems? How does data come in and out of those? And most importantly, you need to talk to the business operators in that space. And you need to learn what are the pain points they're having with the data. What are some of the challenges they cannot get over? What are the barriers, right, that are preventing them from achieving certain goals related to this type of information? And as you talk to different departments and you gather that broader perspective, as an architect or a solution architect in this case, you're then going to take that current state, you're going to look at the way things operate today, people, process, and technology, and flows of information. And you're going to look at it comprehensively across all of those areas, and you will start to see themes, right? You'll start to see common concerns that come out. And some are not always about the systems, they're about business process, right? Customer A called us and they didn't know, right, that this other department was also contacting them. So they're wanting to know, for example, why are they getting 2 communications about the same thing, for example, from 2 different contact points at the same company? And that really shows you the disparate or the siloed nature of managing, customer in this example. And so I think if you look across your businesses, you get a current state, you take the problems, you take the concept of MDM, somebody knowledgeable in what real enterprise MDM looks like. And you can now take that broader picture with a current state view, and you can apply MDM solutions to that. And you can see where you need to bring certain sources of data together. You need to unify that, bring it together, apply mastering, have common reference data, common ways of applying data quality, right? Data governance checks, and driving that centralized, highly trusted source across all the sources of data, right? That centralized source of truth that now the individual departments can operate off of. And they are, guaranteed to have a congruent view of the customer and they'll be able to better deliver to the customer and have a better relationship with the customer, better business outcomes.
Better business outcomes. I think that's kind of the key. Answering the question of how do we get stakeholder engagement from a Profisee perspective, we have a thing we call the business impact roadmap, where we try to do, it's not just a return on investment calculation, but it's really a stakeholder survey of who's going to be impacted and what do they all think. What do they think about the data they have right now, and what about they think about the data they need, and what would be the impact of that? And we find that going around all of the stakeholders and asking them for that information, and then pulling it all together in a single report, I think that's when C-suite people really see, oh, this is more than just clean data. It's a foundation for all of the operational processes that we really want to improve.
Yeah, I agree. Sorry, so something you don't want to miss, right, as part of the operational model is, there's a cost. Technology has a cost, people have a cost, right? And as you look at, the diversity that you have around managing unique customers, right, for example, in your space, or providers, whatever they might be in your business domain. If you look at the pain points and the barriers and the duplicative things that you've instilled to try and band-aid and fix those problems, most of the time, if you can tease those out and recognize them and help the C-suite understand that you're spending duplicative dollars, right? You're delaying time to market. You're causing disruption to the relationship that you have with unique customers, right? In your marketplace, you can end up recovering a lot of your MDM costs and even more, right? If you tease that out and look at it, because C-suite, dollars are important, right? But if you can get a savings and have some optimization to the fluidity of your business around master data, you actually gain those resources back to spend on other things for your company, right? Additional places to invest your time.
And I think in economic terms, the opportunity cost of, if I don't spend the money to get it right, how much time will I spend getting it wrong before I'm forced to go back to the drawing board and get it right?
If you design and deliver it yourself, it will take you years from experience. You'll spend a lot of bumpy nights and bumpy roads trying to make it right, and it'll delay you.
Yep. Eric, I think you were about to say something.
Yeah, I mean, I've got a couple of interesting anecdotes to this. So, getting the business bought into MDM, I believe, remains the #1 challenge for organizations trying to tackle it. MDM tends to be something that the IT organization understands, what it does and how it can help. But I think there is still a huge challenge in getting the business to understand, to kind of get them on board. And, case in point, we have a Gartner analyst here, ex-Gartner analyst here at Profisee, and we were just having a call with another analyst just yesterday evening. And this is still true. 70% of Gartner's inquiries, you think they would be focused on what product should I buy, or other kind of details like that. 70% of their inquiries are how to build a business case and prove the value of MDM to get the business on board. So that remains the biggest challenge, is that usually IT sees the problem, they know MDM can help, but how do I actually get the business bought into it? Martin mentioned our BIR program, which is one way we can help organizations with it. But at the end of the day, master data management is going to cost the business time, and where we've seen organizations. So and Jim asked this question originally. It was in the absence of getting C-level support. So one way is to try to get C-level support, build out that business case, get them on board, and then you have what's probably the easier situation, which is this can be pushed down from above. The other way, which is a little tougher, is building it from the bottom up. And we've had customers do this. I've worked with customers that have done this successfully. And what you do is you go and you find, a peer in the organization, in the business, that has a specific problem, and you don't try to boil the ocean, but you try to solve that problem. And you get them on board. You get their data steward. You get them to have allocate data stewards to managing the data. And you demonstrate some value, and then you can start to kind of expand the program to other groups and to new use cases across the organization. So, building out a broad business case and getting the C-level executives to buy in is ideal. It's certainly easier if you can achieve that, but you can do it from the bottom up. But this is I think one of the biggest challenges that, quite honestly, has kept MDM from becoming as widely adopted as, something like business intelligence. Every company has BI. It's a fraction of those companies that have MDM. They all have MD data problems. They all have MDM. They all could get a tremendous amount of value from MDM, but it's a lot harder for them to get the business to understand the value of it, where it's a lot easier to say, hey, you're going to get some of these charts and graphs and analytics, and it's really pretty, and you can watch the performance of your business. It's a lot easier for business stakeholders to grasp that versus the value of MDM. One of the caveats would be, whenever they turn on their data warehouse, the first thing you learn when you're turning your data warehouse is how bad your data is. And that sometimes can be a catalyst to get the business to act.
Yeah. There's a question, a technical question in the chat. We'll return to that in just a sec. I just have one more thing on this this topic of stakeholder engagement for James. Most often when we're engaging with Microsoft, when Microsoft brings us in, it's because there's some kind of broader program like a digital transformation or something like that, where the customer is attempting, or they're being recommended to bring a lot of new data into the cloud in order to rebuild or rejig in some shape or form the operational processes. And I'm wondering if that gives from your perspective, gives a different incentive for, oh, look, Eric's having a beer right there. The IR program we were just mentioning. Sorry, distracted myself. So, James, where there is already the assumption of a digital transformation program, is there already, from your perspective, an understanding of why there needs to be MDM and why there needs to be a good foundation for the program? Or is it just the same as anything else that they don't really understand until they get deeper in?
Yeah, I would say it's the latter. They don't really understand it. Most times companies I deal with, and they're large Fortune 500 or 100 companies, they still don't have a good understanding of the amount of time it's going to take to govern the data. And many times they've never undertaken something so large of a project on there. And to the point we made earlier, sometimes these are not IT people, but rather business users, and they've already have a use case and they've already got budget for it, and they've already been shown how they can get better insights to the data using something like Power BI or machine learning services and such. And other times it's IT coming in and they know they have to go and prove this to the end users that this is needed. And they're looking for a quick win. And we'll talk to them about having a vision of where they want to go, but then doing certain things where they could get that quick win, that they can show it to the business users, and they can unlock the budget to go and continue to build it out. What's changing over the past few years a lot is, it used to be IT doing everything. Now it's a combination of IT and the business users. And sometimes business users have people who are almost IT inside of their organization and within the company on there. So it's coming out with tools and solutions to allow the blending of an enterprise solution with a more of a smaller solution for some smaller group within that company on there. And it's a challenge because they have different approaches to things. I could not care about an enterprise solution and how things are going to affect other groups in there. So I may overlook cleaning certain data because it doesn't mean anything to me. I'm not going to use it. But an enterprise solution, you are. So you have to have them a meeting between the business users and the IT, and how are they going to work together. So that adds another challenge to it. And when we start hearing about other concepts like data mesh, of who's going to own the data, can we make it more of a distributed system? Some of those things sound great in theory, but they're quite challenging to pull together. But all we can do is educate end users and IT on those challenges. So when they come and go to build it, they are aware of those and can set aside enough time for discussion and for building the solution.
And also make them aware of, I guess, of, as we've all said, the risks of not doing it are, it ultimately will probably take you longer, and you may have a failed project in between times, which nobody wants.
Yeah, I always say, look, this is going to take a long time, and this is not, hey, we're going to build an enterprise data warehouse and we're going to be done with it. It's always evolving. That you're always going to add more sources, and once you give the end users, the business users, something that's of value, they're always going to want more. And I try to tell them, come with an overall vision, create a blueprint of where you want to go, and then build it out in pieces. I use an analogy. It's if you're going to create a city, you're not going to map out the city and all the towns within it and spend all this time architecting it out before you start to build a city. You want to architect out the city and then have a high level understanding of the town, and then build a town and move people into it, and build another town, move people into it. Think of that as an enterprise data warehouse in there. Have that overall vision, but then build out and take handfuls of sources, get those quick wins, and then understand the cleaning that's going to go involved in this one and the mastering that's going to go involved in this one, because that's going to give you an understanding of how it's going to be applied towards the rest of all the data sources.
Yep, I agree. Eric, I think you answered one of the questions, the AWS question in chat, but I'm not sure if everyone can see the answer. Do you want to just address it? We've been talking about Azure here, but we apply equally, I think, to other clouds scenarios. So do you want to just mention that real quick?
Yes, I mean, James alluded to earlier, we have a unique history with Microsoft, and Profisee is, from a technology perspective, unique in the market. We're the only Gartner Magic Quadrant vendor that's really built using the Microsoft tech stack. So a lot of our customers tend to be Microsoft centric, and so a lot of them tend to run on Azure, which is great. But we have architected the platform and we actually support a containerized deployment. And as we all know, containers can run theoretically anywhere. So we've done a lot of investments around Azure Kubernetes Service, but we do support a platform as a service-based deployment on AWS as well as GCP. Still using SQL Server as the backend. So in the case of AWS, it'd be AWS RDS for SQL. And our containers running within Kubernetes. There are some integrations that we're collaborating with at Microsoft, specifically around things like Purview and Synapse and Azure Data Factory. So those are Azure specific, so to speak. But broadly speaking, we have open interfaces and do have a number of customers running in AWS as well. So our customer base is Azure centric. That's obviously, we work a lot with the Azure product teams, but the very nature of containers is such that that we can run natively in really any cloud platform as long as it meets our prerequisites, which at a high level is can run a Windows container, has a SQL Server database, and access to storage and a way to authenticate users are kind of the core prereqs for the platform.
Thanks. I want to get in one more topic before we're on out of time here, and it's the topic of multi-domain, or the different data domains that need to be mastered. There's I guess a theory or a trend for some MDM vendors to create domain-specific hubs, like a customer 360 or a product 360, etc. And I'm curious to hear from James and Neil on what's your view on multi-domain, and is it a good idea to have a solution that kind of stands different hubs that stand by themselves, or do you want to have one solution that kind of covers them all? Well, I have my opinion, but I'll let you guys go first. How about James? What's your take on that?
Well, and this gets a little bit into a recent thing I blogged about with the data mesh, is having all these separate entities. And while all that sounds great in theory, the challenge is I don't think the technology is there yet to make it easy to have all these separate entities and then pull it all together when somebody needs information from all these different entities, not just one. And also a big part of that is mastering. If everybody's going and keeping their own customers, then nobody's mastering it. So you need to have something centralized in order to master it, which goes against some of these concepts of keeping everything on their own little islands and such. And I'm still of the belief that it's better to centralize everything, because you can have IT in charge of cleaning it and mastering it. Because what I find is, if we say all these individual organizations within a company are going to do their own thing, they have to have that expertise. And that's the real challenge, is if it's done by IT and centralized, you have a set group of people who are experts who are all doing it the same way. And if everybody in an organization has their own experts, well, they may not have experts, and they're all doing it their own way, and that can cause a lot of issues, especially when you try to combine all the data. So
the intent to get rid of silos actually could create more silos if you don't do it the right way.
Yeah, and there's a lot of challenges in this, and there's a lot of good ideas that are hard to implement. Data lake was a great idea 10 years ago, and everybody thought it was this land of unicorns and rainbows, and we put all our data in there and some magic going to come out. And then we realized, no, it doesn't work that way. And over time, we realized you still need a relational database. You still need to put the work in, the cleaning and governing it. The data lake does not lessen that. In fact, it makes it, you have to do more data governance with the data lake. You get a lot of benefits from it, but there's a trade-off of spending more time organizing the data and having a data lake as well as a relational database in there. And that hasn't changed. And we're still, now it's going full circle again, and people are saying, well, maybe you don't need a relational database, which is a whole other topic. But the idea is you need to take copies of the data and make it into a way that is easier for end users to do self-service BI. And that may mean having multiple copies of the data, cleaning it and mastering it and making it so I just go to a report and I click and drag and I can create my own reports. Because I may be somebody who has no idea about IT, and I just want to go and build my own data and create my own insights of that. To do that, somebody's got to do the work to put it in that right format. And that's where the challenge is. And that's where I struggle when everybody's doing their own thing and not have a centralized approach.
Okay, great. Neil, what's your take on it? Yesterday, I think you and I spoke about the domains that you've mastered, and it's primarily around provider, but there are many other kind of subdomains and reference data and things like that. And what's your take on having one tool versus multiple tools or multiple hubs to do that task?
Yeah, so you definitely want to avoid creating more silos, right? And I think once you bring multi-domain capabilities into an MDM tool, you don't want to view that as a way to enable data islands or data silos. The way that we view it is we have very provider, right, as an example in the healthcare space, whether it's a facility or an individual, doctor, for example. Those are unique entities. Those are a domain, right? They are related to each other. We need to have golden identifiers, right? Unique views of those individuals and make sure we don't have duplicates, et cetera. It's about data quality, right? It's about data accuracy. But on the flip side, right? If you need, let's say you're a company that has a very, very large product inventory, right? So let's say you're a healthcare company and you have providers and you need to know that information too, but you may have hundreds and hundreds of sources or dozens maybe with product level information in it. So it makes sense that you will have a domain with your provider type data in it that you'll master, and the set of business operations around that, right? The stewardship, the rules are very unique to how that data needs to be governed and curated. But on the case where you need to master the concept of product, well, that's not necessarily in this example, it's not related to providers. So the discipline, the rules, the operational model around mastering product might be different. And that's where we see the concept of multi-domain applying, right? I would not go down the path of having multiple domains where each of those domains is trying to master and steward the concept of provider, right? And creating what I would say is a unique consumption view of that provider entity. And to me, that's using MDM for the wrong purpose, right? MDM is about bringing that unity and that congruence and understanding about the unique entities or informational assets in your business information model. If you need custom views of that entity, that's where I think the downstream piece is what James was talking about, right? You can take the data back out of the MDM. You can use elements from the data lake, not the data swamp, right? You got to be careful. It can't be the data swamp. But you can, to give a business insights layer that allows one team to pull in product or provider and view it with some additional data, and have another team pull in a different consumption perspective of provider, right, into their need, but to have provider be the same across both. That's where I think you got to use the MDM tool. Multi-domain, just be careful, right? don't master the same logical business entity in two different domains. Then you're not solving. That's actually an anti-pattern.
Yes. Yeah. So thank you. So we're in the home stretch here. I think I forgot to mention at the beginning that if you stay right to the end, you'll be entered to a drawing for a bottle of whiskey to go with your kit if you haven't already consumed your whole old-fashioned kit. And if we've had some good questions in the chat, and we've been able to answer a few of them. If you have any more questions from the audience members, please enter them in, and we'll try and hit them if we can. And so as a final kind of wrap-up topic, I'll start with Eric. What would be your advice to anybody on the call who is considering master data management? What would be some of the things that you think would be important in a tool set or in a project that you should pay attention to as part of your initiating the project, and what should you work on to avoid? What would be your thoughts there? And I'll then go to James and circle back to Neil on that same question.
Yeah, I mean, the biggest challenge that I've seen customers struggle with is scenarios when they're trying to go too broad. This concept of start small and grow. Where I've seen companies struggle and their projects fail is where they say, hey, we're gonna try to manage we're gonna get our first MDM release, we're gonna get everything under control, we're gonna get it perfect. And what happens is the project drags on. The business starts to question, is this thing ever gonna provide any value? Even when they go live, a lot of times the bulk of the work that they've done is sort of theoretically valuable, but not actually delivering any tangible, measurable value to the business. So when the business starts to measure, okay, what have we spent and what do we get out of it? They see an imbalance there, and that oftentimes puts the funding for those programs at risk. So, so if I was going to say something to avoid, it's avoid trying to boil the ocean. I can't emphasize enough. Find a specific business problem with a business stakeholder that cares about it and just do what it takes to solve that. That doesn't mean that over time you don't want to expand the program and maybe ultimately get to that broader based set of deliverables and functionality. But the way to get there is in increments. And in fact, the way we've set up the way our platform is licensed is to enable just that. You can buy the platform, or you can license our platform with just enough to manage a very small bit of something. And then as you prove value, you can expand the records, if you will, that you can manage. So we've tried to set both the product up to where you can deliver something quickly, align that to the licensing model, because that's where we see customer success. Where we see people fail is where they try to do too much up front.
Excellent. Thanks, Eric. James, same question for you. What considerations would you recommend someone take into account, whether technical or organizational, or what would be the things that would be uppermost in your mind for advice?
I make
Other
it
than
easy.
running in Azure, of course.
Yeah, I make it easy. Just get an expert. You've never done it before, and if it's not a very small MDM project, get a partner to go and who's done it before. This is not something you want to try to do on your own. And understand that sometimes it's much better to spend some money with a third party than do it on your own, because you're going to save a lot of money and you're going to have a solution that's going to be much better than something you would have built. So it's always that build versus buy, and 99% of the time with MDM, it's always better to buy than build it on your own.
Fantastic, thank you. So Neil, we'll wrap with you as the ultimate practitioner here. With many years of experience under your belt, what would be any kind of top of mind advice, hints, or tips that you would hand out to anybody who's following in your footsteps?
So I'll echo what James said, right? And I mentioned this earlier. It's MDM. If you just read, the high level information, it seems fairly simple, right? You can see the patterns, but doing it well is hard. And if you've never done it before, to James' point, get a partner that has experience in it. That will be an accelerator for you. It will be money well spent. And at the same time, you're going to have some people, obviously at your company, they're going to learn from that. as far as, you know, the other challenge is trying to get business or C-suite to buy off on it, or to have the different silos. If there's not a central team, right, but how do you get the departments involved? And again, it's, if you get that partner involved, they will help you analyze the current state, right? You can provide the skeleton of that, but they can help you really ferret out what the major issues are in each of those that MDM will solve. And then you can take that, you can prioritize it, and you can use some of the backup material, right, information, right? Make decisions on facts, right, not assumptions. So, you know, use that partner to help get to the facts, and then bring that business case forward. And, you know, echoing what Eric said, you can't do this as a big bang, right? It's just, it's too much. It's overwhelming. And you'll end up under delivering, right? There won't be a realization of ROI. So think about it incrementally. Get a partner to help you with deciding what that incremental plan is going to look like, and to help you justify it to the business. And then, you know, ferret out the cost savings and the ROI aspect, and go to leadership with it, and pitch it, right? And help them, most importantly, understand the problems you're trying to solve and what the value is going to be to your business.
Fantastic. Thank you, everybody. I think hopefully everybody on the call got something out of this. I would say that even just the last 10 minutes of conversation there is, given the, you know, the experience of the people involved, that's more valuable than any given inquiry with Gartner, I would say. So hopefully everyone has got something out of it. As I said at the beginning, we've this is the first of our forays into doing these kind of evening format things. There should be a survey somewhere on your screen. We would love it if you could give us a little bit of feedback on whether you felt this worked and was a good idea. And with that, I think we will wrap up the time. It's kind of late already on the East Coast. And to someone's question in the chat, yes, this was recorded, and you should get a playback link sometime in the next 24 hours or so. So with that, I will thank our panelists, Eric, James, and Neil. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you, everybody else who joined us here, and we look forward to speaking to you at some point in the future. Thanks, everybody. Oh, and cheers.
Thank you.
Good night.